Over the course of the last few decades, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo has slowly gone from being seen as a bit of a lesser entry in his wider canon to being viewed by many as not just his best film, but even quite possibly the greatest film ever made. And while bestowing the latter title upon it might be giving it a little more credit than it's due, it's not impossible to see why some people think of it that way. Bernard Herrmann's soundtrack is phenomenal. The opening titles and poster created by Saul Bass are visually striking. The directing, cinematography, and script meet and then exceed Hitchcock's usual standards. And James Stewart gives what I think genuinely might be the single best performance of his entire career. It really is an amazing movie and one that manages to enthrall me every time I watch it. And part of what makes it so great, in my opinion, is the relationship it shares to Hitchcock's other films. Vertigo's plot is structured in an unusual manner. Yet at the same time it has a clear parallel in the structure of Hitchcock's other best-regarded film, Psycho. Both films are divided into two distinct halves, wherein the unassuming protagonist endeavors to accomplish their main goal of the film, in Scotty's case to protect Madeline, and in Marion Crane's case to escape with the money she's stolen. Both protagonists are working for their goals because of the lure of money, but also for love. Halfway through the film, however, Hitchcock turns the story on its head by killing the female lead, and as a result causing the main protagonist's goal to fail forever. The second half of both films then proceeds to deal with the aftermath of the horrible death, and focus on a character who, while initially shown as sympathetic, is eventually revealed as being sinister and insane, whilst also owing their insanity to the influence of an outside figure who controlled their life but has since left it, Norma Bates and Gavin Elster, respectively. In addition, when the truth about Madeline and how Gavin used Scotty is eventually revealed, it is directed and written so masterfully and perfectly that it explains everything through the use of a murder plot that's very stereotypical of a Hitchcock film, but that also feels new and different because instead of focusing the movie on said plot from the murderer's point of view, as Hitchcock did with Dial M for Murder, Rope, Strangers on a Train, and more, it instead chooses to focus on the murderer's unwitting pawn and deals with the ramifications of the situation on his life. And it is precisely because the plot of the film is so intrinsically Hitchcockian, yet uniquely written and directed, that Vertigo stands out so much. That said, it's really Jimmy Stewart's acting that makes the central character of Scotty as compelling as he is. With the exception of the 1938 film After the Third Man, Jimmy Stewart consistently played characters who are nice, polite, and generally likable. And in Vertigo, that's once again how he's set up. He's shown to be a policeman, he's given comedic banter with his character's ex-fiancée, he saves Madeline's wife, and Stewart plays this material all in his usual charismatic way. Even when he begins to become infatuated with the woman he thinks is his friend's wife, the audience is still largely meant to sympathize with him. And both Stewart's acting and the dialogue the two share make this relatively easy to an extent. And when she dies, and he's unable to get over losing her, we're still supposed to sympathize with him. But that gets harder to do when he becomes infatuated with a girl simply because she looks like Madeline. He honestly starts to come across as creepy, but then it's revealed that it is in fact the same girl he's previously loved, which, while complicating the relationship, provides a bit of a means for the audience to justify continuing to sympathize with him, and by showing that wasn't really his friend's wife, actually vindicates him of any wrongdoing earlier on. Never mind the fact that Scotty doesn't know any of this information. And yet, as Scotty becomes increasingly obsessive and starts to impose his will over Judy's more and more, in an attempt to force her into what he wants her to be, it becomes harder and harder to justify his actions and see him as a heroic character, till eventually the audience can't really sympathize with him much at all, and must instead accept the fact that he's become the villain. And it's exactly for that reason that casting Jimmy Stewart in the role is so genius, I think. The entire film is about the destruction and decay of one man's morality as he spirals into obsession and insanity, and who better to drive this home than Jimmy Stewart? Having been typecast as a good guy and having previously played heroic characters in Hitchcock's films Rope, Rear Window, and The Man Who Knew Too Much, the use of Stewart in this role, along with the plot's previously discussed parallels to other films, serves to kind of make this character a symbol of the average Hitchcockian protagonist, and by extension to show just how thin the line between them and a Hitchcockian antagonist truly is, which, given the complex nature of Hitchcock's own legacy of genius and wit against a backdrop of darkness and cruelty, is a message that seems particularly apt, even if the comparison wasn't intended by him. All of that said, though, Vertigo isn't quite perfect. There's one particular area that's always bothered me about this movie, And unfortunately, it's right at the end. After 2 hours of setup that's taken Jimmy Stewart's character and pushed him to his limits and beyond, the climactic moment finally comes where he's gone completely insane and Judy's going to die. The audience knows she'll die, and she knows it too, and all either party can do is wait for the horrible deed to finally come at Scotty's hand. But then all of a sudden, this happens.
No! I heard voices. God have mercy.
An unnamed and uncredited nun, who hasn't been in the movie at all so far, walks in, startles her, and that's it, she's dead. This moment is completely and utterly frustrating to me because of how flippantly it undercuts everything that's come before. It doesn't have any connection to the previous 2 hours of setup, with Judy's death becoming an accidental act brought about by a brand new character, rather than the culmination and natural result of everything that's occurred over the course of the film. And as a result, it completely robs Scotty of his agency and leaves his character arc on an unsatisfactory note, forcibly pulling back right at the moment when he would become truly and undeniably villainous. Now he's simply the victim of another person's actions once again, and while there might be a level of bitter irony in that, the way it's handled feels like a cop-out. And if they really did want to end it by emphasizing how little control Scotty has, a surprise nun appearance really doesn't seem like the best way to have done that. Nonetheless, the ending doesn't ruin the movie by any means. From the layered, unique, and dark script to the soundtrack that manages to be both romantic and horrific, sometimes simultaneously, to Jimmy Stewart's truly Oscar-worthy performance to even the opening titles, Vertigo is the product of a director, lead actor, composer, graphic designer, writing team, and more who are masters of their respective trades and at the height of their abilities. It's a fascinating piece of Hitchcock's filmography, and even though I really don't like the ending, almost every aspect of it works so well that I have no problem placing it among my top 25 favorite movies. But what do you think? Is Vertigo really a masterpiece, or is it overrated? Do you agree that the ending doesn't quite work, or do you think it does? I'd love to hear other opinions regarding the film or this video, so if you have something to say, feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you think. But for now, goodbye, and I hope to see you next time. That was probably utter garbage.